Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this December the 10th, 2024 meeting into order. Everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amendment and approval of the draft agenda. Does anyone have any questions in regards to anything that's on the agenda today?
I do not, Mayor.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Not, do I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Today we'll be having our minimum housing standard training session. You have the floor, sir.
They've got this ordinance.
Okay.
The plan is we'll go over the housing code stuff, and then we'll briefly talk about the non-residential, and I'll explain the similarities and the differences when we get to that point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Give one to Kimberly, please.
All right. Got you a little light reading material there. So. Okay. Hello?
Good.
All right, I am John Gaines. I am within Focus. I was your code officer for a little while. And then we brought Andy in to work here. What we're going to go over today is the process of minimum housing code. If you will,
Sir, what is Andy's last name, please?
Thompson.
Thank you.
If you will turn in your packet, you'll see a flow chart. Actually, you'll see two. There's one for minimum housing and there's one for non-residential buildings or structures.
Last two sheets.
And I'm not going to go in detail on this. As we go through the training, we're going to cover a lot of this, but this is just a picture of how the process of the minimum housing code goes from the time you get the complaint until you can close the case. And you'll see there are some situations in there. For example, it starts off at the very top to the right of the box that says minimum housing code process. It says complaint received. We initiate the investigation and prepare for the inspection. If it is in violation, then there's one direction that we go. If it's not in violation, then the complaint and case is closed. Okay, and it does that throughout. There's some decision points that we have to make as we're doing an inspection and going through the process. And this kind of explains it in a picture form. So hopefully that will be helpful. There's also one in your packet for the non-residential code, which is set up similar way. To start with, and when I do this training, I try and do it very basic and simple, as if the people that are being trained don't know anything about it, okay? To start with, we cannot do anything unless there's a state statute that enables the town to develop an ordinance to pertain to that. It's the same way with nuisance, junk cars, minimum housing, non-residential, all of that. So you'll see here a list of the statutes that pertain to those particular types of code cases. It is divided up to where it talks about what you can do within the corporate limits and what you can do within the entire planning and development regulation jurisdiction. As you can see, nuisance and abandoned vehicles is only in the corporate limits. Minimum housing and non-residential can be done in your ETJ. There are other statutes that we get involved in sometimes. The second one on that list deals with the lis pendens, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then it goes on down. A lot of these we don't deal with on a day-to-day basis, but they are part of what we can get involved in within a minimum housing code case. One example is Chapter 19, also Chapter 15, where it talks about warrants to conduct the inspections authorized by law. An administrative inspection warrant, we are authorized by law to use those. Okay, preparing for the inspection. In order for us to enter onto a property to conduct an inspection, we can't do anything with a house unless we have conducted an inspection on it, unless it's one that's just completely caved in. But we have to do an inspection on it and determine whether or not it meets the standards of the minimum housing code. Any violations there, then we consider those as a violation, and it's something that's going to have to be repaired. Before we can go into a house, we've got to make sure we've got a couple things. One, the inspector has to have been authorized by the town. Okay. Two, we've got to have a right to entry, and the only way we can do that is if we've got consent of the owner or if we're utilizing a warrant. Usually we do not get a warrant until we've at least had one attempt in getting the owners to show up to allow us for the inspection. For us to do the inspection, we've got certain laws that we got to follow. And that even goes into the 4th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and the 14th Amendment of the North Carolina Constitution. On the 3rd page, it talks about the warrant. The administrative inspection warrant is actually a 2-page document. It is required to be printed front and back. And that's where we fill out the information related to the property and why we think there's a need to go into that property. Once that document is filled up, then we take it to the magistrate. We have to explain to him what we're doing. He reads over the affidavit and he signs the warrant. With that in hand, then we can go into the property. And that includes if we have to break into the property to get in. Now, usually we don't want to break in a way that we cannot properly secure it when we get done. So if we'll look for things like a window that's not locked and can be opened, we'll look for doors that are open, those kinds of things. Sometimes we have to get a locksmith to come out, and the locksmith will open the door and let us in, and then we're able to secure it when we leave. So once we get the warrant, we go in and do the inspection. The warrant actually is done in 4 copies. There's one for the file. There's one that the magistrate keeps when he signs it. There's one that we give to the owner if they show up. If they don't, then we post it on the property. And then there's one that we have to return to the courthouse to show that we did actually execute the warrant. All right. An important thing that some folks get confused. I run into a lot of code officers that I've trained that have this issue, and they think that because they got a warrant now, they can not only go onto the property, but they can take whatever they need to that's in violation, and you can't do that. That taking has to be done under a different process. The warrant gives you access to the property. It gives you access only between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and only within 24 hours of it being issued. So if we go get it today, we've got to do the inspection either today or tomorrow, and then it has to be returned. Okay.
Would you rather us wait for questions, or what's easier for you?
Either way, I'm able to handle it either way.
When you're accessing a property, I would assume you'd have law enforcement with you.
Yes, anytime we exercise a warrant, we take law enforcement with us.
Okay.
Yep. If we're not having to, like when we call for the initial inspection, we send a letter to the owner. If they show up, everything's hunky-dory, we go in and do the inspection. There was no need for a warrant and no need for law enforcement usually.
Can you only access, once you enter the building, let's say you do it through a locksmith, and then you get inside, are you allowed free access to the house? Can you look in any room?
Everywhere.
Can you take photographs?
Yes.
Okay.
We just can't take any property, but we can take photographs of everything, and we do. That's part of our documentation. That's part of how we can create the report on what we inspected.
Thank you.
All right. Let's skip down now to where it talks about minimum housing code. Our authority to even have a minimum housing code comes from North Carolina General Statute 160D, and it's actually Article 12, but our authority comes from the first paragraph, which is Section 1201, and it gives us authority to inspect both occupied and abandoned structures. So if you've got one that nobody's lived in for 20 years, we still have the authority to inspect that under the standards of the housing code. Speaking of standards, the law stipulates structural, plumbing, heating, electrical, ventilation, space use and location, safe and sanitary, insect and other rodent or other infestation, and then there's still a section in there that talks about rooming houses. Rooming houses have to meet the same standards as any other dwelling, but they've got 3 or 4 specifics that are related to them only because they're unique. All right. As far as the inspection, we already talked about that. You got to have the consent. You got to have a warrant, one or the other. You conduct the inspection. You do that in accordance with the applicable standards that are written in your ordinance. And while this set of standards says structural and plumbing and so forth, your minimum housing code actually goes into greater detail of what those standards are and what they have to meet. There are certain things that are mandatory to have. If a house doesn't have it, then it's automatically considered to be unfit to live in. One of those is heat. Water and electricity are others. So once you've done the inspection, then we move forward into drafting the report of what the violations were that we noted and showing which standard was violated and what needs to be done. We will then put the report together, also include a complaint and notice of hearing document that establishes the date and time and location of where the hearing will be held. That has to be mailed to the owner by certified mail. You can also send a duplicate copy by first class mail. And when you send the first class, you also have to post it on the property. As a routine, we do all 3. That way we haven't missed any opportunity to contact the owners. So one is sent by certified, return receipt requested. One is mailed by first class and then posted on the house. If the certified mail comes back as unclaimed or refused, but the first class mail does not come back within 10 days of its mailing, the property owner is considered to be served. And then we can move forward to the next step. If they show up to the hearing, that's good. We can have a conversation about the things that are wrong with it and what needs to be done, discuss what their intentions are, discuss options and so forth. Sometimes we get into it and we find out that they don't want anything to do with it anymore. They want to sell the property. If we've got a list of investors in the area that are interested in those kinds of properties, we try and give out that list. If they're interested in, they decide they just don't want to do anything, they're going to tear it down. If we've got a list of demolition contractors, we'll hand them that list. We never point at one and say, this is the best one to go. We're not supposed to do that. And all we're trying to do is help them move the case forward. And in doing so, if we can help them find contractors, give them a list of 4 or 5, then that's helpful. So, all right. Now, as far as issuing the complaint notice of hearing, we do have an option if there are owners that we cannot find and we've mailed out the notices. Maybe they came back as, it's no longer a valid address or whatever. We do have the option of posting it in the newspaper. Okay. So we can publish the hearing notice in the newspaper, and we can actually do a combination of the two. If we've got part of the property owners where we know where they are and we've got valid addresses and we can send it to them, we will do that. If there's a couple that nobody knows where they are, we can publish that in the paper, and that will take care of that part of it. At the hearing, like I said, on the complaint and notice of hearing, there's a date and time and location where the hearing will be held. Usually we do it at the town hall. I have had 1 or 2 where we actually had to go to the property because the owner was bedridden. So we went there, met with them at their request. Usually what I do is when everybody's seated, I hand them a notepad and I ask them to give me their name, phone numbers, all their contact information. And the reason I ask them to write it down, even if I have it in the case file, is that's also proof that they were there. Because I've had some that said, I never had a hearing with you. Yeah, you did. Here's your handwriting. Here's where you gave me your address, phone number, and so forth. The housing inspector would open up the hearing and start talking about the conditions that were found that were in violation and discuss the options and so forth. If the owner has any information they can provide that is helpful towards the direction of the way the case needs to go, like, we've got a contractor lined up, he's going to start next Tuesday, or, we've got somebody that's going to tear it down, or we're dropping off a dumpster tomorrow and we're going to start cleaning it out because it's a mess. Grandma was a hoarder, that kind of thing. Continue the conversation. And then what we want to do is come to a decision as to what the condition of the house is. Usually our ordinance talks about what we call 50% rule. That's based on the tax value of the structure. So if you've got a $20,000 tax value on the structure alone, not including the land, then the 50% rule would be $10,000. If the cost of the repairs to the structure are estimated to be more than that $10,000, then the order would be to repair or demolish. If it's less than that, the order would be repair or close. In closing it, we have a list of how they're supposed to go about that. And that should be, I believe, the last page in your packet. It says Housing Inspector Standards for Vacating and Closing Dwellings. And basically what it talks about is to have the house cleaned out of anything that could draw rodents, snakes.
See that. You guys have it?
It should be towards the back. It should be
Thank you.
right in front of the flow charts.
It's
if I
right
remember
after
Got
correctly.
page 6
it.
of 6.
It's 2 pages. Okay. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So the idea is get it cleaned out so that it's not going to bring any rodents or, other infestation into the house. Furniture, clothes, that kind of thing, we don't touch any of that. It stays in there. The whole idea behind closing a house is to stabilize it so it doesn't get any worse until the owner has an opportunity to do something with it. Fix it up, whatever. As you'll notice, that talks about a 1-year period. The statute gives us the authority to establish a 1-year period for them to conduct the repairs and so forth to bring it up.
Who has the authority to designate what that $10,000 number you referenced? Is that you? Is that,
It's usually us, because what we do is we estimate the cost of the repairs that need to be done. Like, I had one where we had to estimate pretty much dollar for dollar. So I went on to the Lowe's website and figured out what an entire bathroom replacement would be, because his had exploded. Same thing with, the kitchen requirements, some plumbing repair. He had no heating system that worked, so that was a big chunk of
so
it.
the town wouldn't have to bring in a third-party expert, let's say, or consultant to come up with that number? That
No,
would be part of your duties.
right.
Thank you.
And part of the reason that we don't normally want to have a contractor come in and give an estimate is because you're going to lose contractors that way, because you're never going to give them that job. They're going to come in and estimate a cost for you, and unless you're paying them for that estimate, they don't make any money on it. So most of the time, they're not interested in coming in to do that.
Thank you.
The other thing is, you can get 3 contractors to go in and give you an estimate and have them have a list of things to do, and you're going to get 3 separate prices. So the idea is get in the ballpark, and if you're on the fence as to what it should be, usually it's a better thing to go with the lesser, so we would board it up. Again, boarding it up is to stabilize it so it doesn't get any worse, because if you've got one that is possible to repair, you don't want it to go over that line to where there's more water damage and vandalism and those kinds of things. So once we've held the hearing, if we've got a list of demolition contractors or investors or anything that we can provide them to help them in the direction they want to go, then we'll do that. We also want to, if we're issuing an order to close, we're going to give them a copy of that document that you have, so they see what the standards are. One of the reasons we developed the standards is we've had people try and board up a house with 1/4-inch plywood, and they kind of just aim it across and put a couple nails in there, and it ends up getting broken into and vandalized. We require the 1/2-inch plywood form fitted to the doors or windows, using screws, lengthy screws, 2.5 inch, and that way it secures the building, and they can still go in and out to do the repairs or have their contractor do it or whatever. So it still is able to work towards the repairs. Once the hearing is done, then soon after that, we're going to issue what's called the finding of fact and order. This is discussed in 160D 1203, and it's also discussed in your minimum housing code. The options that we have, as I said earlier, repair or close, repair or demolish. Once we issue that order, the property owner has a right to appeal that decision that we've made, and they would do that to the Board of Adjustment here in town. They are also designated by your housing code as the Housing Appeals Board.
Lisa, would they have to wait for the next Board of Adjustment meeting? Would it be a special meeting because of the situation?
It would depend on the time.
Well, it's got to be, it says within 10 days.
Well, the owner has 10 days in which to appeal,
Okay, and then,
and that gets the ball rolling on it.
okay.
Okay? It can be your next scheduled meeting, or, if you've got some other things going on with the Board of Adjustment and you've already called a special meeting, you can add that to it, or you can call a special meeting just for that. But it's not necessary, because once they file the appeal notice, it stays all action of enforcement against the property until a decision of the Board of Adjustment. Okay? All right. Once the time period on the finding of fact and order has expired, and for demolition, we always give 90 days, and your ordinance says that a period of 90 days is considered acceptable for that. We can't issue a lesser time period on a demolition. We can on a closure, okay? But they have to have at least 90 days in which to deal with the demolition. And on either the closure or the demolition, they have a right to appeal. All right.
Well, I don't see that 90 days here, but maybe it's
It's in the ordinance.
Okay, as opposed to, it's not in your training sheet here.
Right.
Okay, all right.
And the
Never mind.
reason is I've got some towns that say they don't feel 90 days is enough, so they bump it up, 10 or 20 days or
Is that
whatever.
the start of demolition or the completion of demolition?
Start of demolition. We don't touch it until they've had their 90 days. They may want to demolish it themselves, and if they do, then we'll help them through that process. Because, like I tell people all the time, most property owners have never had to deal with the demolition of a structure on their property, so this whole process is new to them. The other thing is then it gets into the need for asbestos inspection, and if there is found asbestos, then that has to be removed before you can do the demolition. We also suggest to them that if they intend to demolish it, first thing is check with the fire department and see if the fire department can burn it. If they can burn it for a training, that will reduce the amount of debris that has to go to the landfill. It saves them money. And it still is going to have an asbestos inspection because they will not burn it and cannot burn it unless it has had that. But it's another option that we try and lead them through to save them money and to accomplish the goal of getting the property in compliance. All right, abandonment of intent to repair. If we have issued an order to repair or close and the owner boards it up themselves, or we have to come to you with a memorandum and ordinance to close, then once it is properly closed, then the 1-year clock starts. If they don't do anything within that 1 year, then we come back to you, and depending on the condition of the house, the order that we would be looking for you from, if it has not deteriorated further, the order would be for them to have 90 days to repair or demolish. If it has gotten worse and it's now into the point where it should be demolished, the order we would be asking you for is an ordinance to demolish. But they have 1 year to do their thing on it. Otherwise, they're considered to basically abandon the intent to do anything with the property. So that's why we come back to you.
Who issues that, Lisa? Is that coming from town council? That ordinance to
Yes.
demolish?
Yes.
I didn't know if it came from planning or
No.
code enforcement or,
We would draft the ordinance and the memorandum and bring it to you. You would be the ones to approve or disapprove, to adopt it. Okay. We can't take any action on a house until that has occurred. And that brings me to another thing. A lot of folks get confused on the difference between what the building code can do and what housing code can do. Building inspectors can condemn a house at the beginning of the process and then go through the steps. Housing code cannot. We do the inspection, we do the hearing, we issue the finding of fact and order, and if at the end of that time nothing's been done to the house, it's still in a dilapidated or deteriorated condition, for us to be able to move forward to the next set of steps, we've got to come to you. We would develop a memorandum explaining the background and everything related to the house. We would do an ordinance document for either the closure or the demolition, and we bring it to you. Until you adopt one of those ordinances, we don't have the authority to condemn it, as everybody says. We usually don't use the word condemned in minimum housing because we don't really condemn it. The decision is made on the back end by you guys, and we can't touch it until you have adopted that ordinance.
John,
Sir?
we have two particular cases here that it's been years that neighbors have been complaining,
Mhm.
and the houses get worse and worse. And worst case scenario, how long does it take to play this out? Once-
It can be years. It depends on the situation. It depends on what's going on with the house, who the ownership is as far as it a single person Or has that person died and there's heirs and we're in the process of trying to find all the heirs? That kind of thing. We've had a few unique situations. You know, we've had some where the county let us know in the middle of the process that they were going to foreclose on a property. At that point, we stop what we're doing because we don't want to invest any more money into that property for the county to turn around and foreclose on it and sell it and the town not get their demolition money back. Okay. And I've seen that happen. We've had counties where they would foreclose. We had one, they didn't even tell the town they were foreclosing. They just did it. And we saw there was an ownership change the day we were getting ready to demolish it. So we don't want to waste your money. We want to do everything we can to try and recover your money when we do these things, whether it's a nuisance abatement or a demolition or boarding up a house. We want to put a lien on the property for those things so that you can recover that money, your investment in that property. Does that kind of answer?
And so really, in reality, the next door neighbor or the people who live across the street, they're just stuck with that nuisance possibly for years.
Not necessarily. Again, the ones that go on for years are usually a unique situation. The average one runs anywhere from about 4 or 5 months to maybe a year, year and a half. Just depends on the process. We've had them stuck in the asbestos realm. You know, we get an asbestos inspector, and then it turns out this place is riddled with asbestos. Well, we can't touch the house until we get that out. So then we come back to you guys and say, here's how much it's going to cost. You know, are we okay to go through with this? And then we'll do that. And scheduling the contractors takes a little time. So on a good, everything works out right, 4 or 5 months to a year, where there's hiccups, and there's usually hiccups because we're dealing with people, it could go longer than that. If it's a nuisance situation or whatever, we can usually get those done a little quicker. I believe our nuisance ordinance has a stipulation in there if there's a dilapidated structure that's just fallen in and there's absolutely no way to save it. For example, a severely fire damaged house, we can usually deal with that under the nuisance ordinance, and we don't have to go through all the steps here. We just do like we do with the nuisance. Issue a notice of violation to the owner, tell them they got 30 days, 45 days, whatever, to remove the violation. And if they don't, we put a contractor on it and clean it up and put a lien on the property. That only happens on a few. Okay. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So on the abandonment of intent, if you turn to page 6, at the top there, it talks about if it is determined that the repair or the dwelling to render it fit for human habitation can be made at a cost of not exceeding 50% then of the current value of the dwelling, the ordinance shall require the owner to repair or demolish or remove the dwelling within 90 days. So that's after we've gone through the housing code process. They boarded it up for a year. They didn't do anything during that year, and we're coming back to you. This is the ordinance that I said was a little bit different, basically the second time around, okay? If it is determined that the repair of the dwelling to render it fit for human habitation cannot be made at a cost not exceeding 50% of the current value, then the ordinance shall require the owner to demolish and remove the dwelling within 90 days. So if it is deteriorated further during its closure, then we're going to come to you and say, give us permission to tear this thing down. And you're going to issue an order from that gives that owner 90 days to demolish it. And if they don't, then we come right behind them and we demolish it and put a lien on the property.
And to be clear, that's 90 days. It happens first after the complaint, the investigation, the orders process, then after a closure process that has 1 year to go through. then they get 90 days.
Yes.
You know, so they're easily up to a year and a half.
That's on, yeah, and that's only on a closure.
Okay.
If we come to you the first time and it's a repair or demolish order that we have issued, we're coming to you asking you to give us permission to demolish it.
And that doesn't require the 1 year waiting period?
No. They only get the 1 year period if we've ordered it to be boarded up. Okay? And when I say we, there's kind of a two-phase process there. We issue the finding of fact and order that says repair or close in a certain period of time, and it can be less than 90 days because they're boarding it up, not tearing it down. If they don't respond to that time period and do either the boarding up or the repairing, then we come to you. And we're going to ask at that point for an ordinance to close, and we're going to physically board it up once you approve that. Okay. Then the 1 year starts once we've done that. Then at the end of that 1 year, if they've still done nothing, then this part comes into play. But if we issued the order to demolish, repair or demolish, and they didn't do either, we're only coming to you to ask you to authorize the demolition. And there is no 1 year period. There's no extended periods or anything like that, unless you choose to grant it by giving an effective date of that ordinance for later than today, for example.
And you have a duration period that once the repair starts, that it must be completed. Otherwise, they could, put a nail in once a week. And
Well, that's where it gets interesting because a lot of people don't understand. They're going to be required to get certain permits, and those permits have timelines on them.
yes,
Okay.
from our
However, under the housing code, I don't have to comply with those permit time periods. I've issued a 90-day order. If they go and they get a permit and then they nail one nail and they don't do anything else, at the end of the 90 days, I'm coming to you. If they're doing the work and they're getting their permits and they're getting their inspections and the house is moving forward towards the being made fit to live in, we don't have a problem giving them an extension to that original 90 days because they're progressing. And we know sometimes getting the repairs done takes a little longer, but the goal is compliance.
But that makes it subjective on your part, on our part, as to whether reasonable progress is being made. And
Well,
that can be sticky, I would assume.
I don't know that that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, the reason I say
Hope I'm
that
wrong.
is we're under two separate laws. Their law says that if they issue a permit, you got what, 6 months? Right.
Yeah, but that's our problem on other things we have right now. People will make progress, and then it starts the clock
Mhm.
ticking again.
On their end.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily have to start again on our end because let's say they got a handful of permits and they went out and they did some work on the footers and then they quit. The house is still not in compliance. And if they don't do anything within that 90 days except, dress up the footers and get them to come inspect it, they have not complied with the order. And we can go after them on that and tell them, look, you haven't done anything, we're taking it to council. And anytime we bring an ordinance to demolish or close to council, I always send a letter of intent to the owner to let him know we're coming.
But then does a judge have to make that distinction or that judgment as to, from your description as to the progress of the work, as to whether the owner is actually trying to comply?
If it goes to court, then the judge will have that say. If it's not going to court and the process is we're coming to you, you're the court. Okay. Again, I can't demolish a house until you tell me I can, and I can't do that until we've gone through the steps and we bring it to you at the end of that process. And at the end of that process, you are going to make the decision as to whether, and the owner can come and they can say, look, I did this, and we've got building inspections, proof of what's been done. We've got our inspection, follow-up inspection, because we don't just say, well, I issued you a 90-day order and you didn't do anything. We go in and re-inspect to see if they're meeting that standard.
And I can see my question is really too complicated or complex, too arbitrary, capricious. We can't have wording in here that's really going to deal with it. We just have to rely on good faith, I guess.
Well, and the process, the law dictates the process. So as long as we follow that, we'll be okay. If we deviate from what the law says or what our ordinance says in a way that, I guess for lack of a better way, takes advantage or does a negative impact on the owner where we violated the law, then yeah, that's an issue. Okay.
All right, thank you.
John, the bottom line here is these things take time.
Yes.
And there's all kinds of laws and rules, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes quite a while, but you got to cross your T's, dot your I's, and move on. And hopefully in the end, it works out okay. But
Yeah, and our goal isn't to demolish every house. Our goal is to try and work with the property owners to get the houses to where they're compliant. Sometimes that means they need to demolish it, because it's too far gone for them to be able to repair. Or it's too expensive to repair it. It'd be easier to tear it down and build something new, or bring something, bring a modular in if it's allowed in that zoning district, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So there's options, and that's why at the beginning, at the hearing, we want to talk to the owners about all of those options and see what they want to do. But they have to make a decision at some point, and we have to make a decision at some point. So otherwise, it'll sit there for decades. So,
Yeah, that's it. It's frustrating to me, and I think to the other council members, when you get a complaint from a citizen, could be a neighbor, could be a friend,
mm-hmm.
and all you can tell them is, well, this takes time. So you just have to live next to this dump until
we're
go
able to
through the
do
steps.
something. But one of the things that we try to do is explain to the citizen what we have done and what we're waiting on. Okay. And in some cases, that wait time is out of our control. If the county is in the process of foreclosing, and I know we had one here where it was being foreclosed and then foreclosure stopped, and then the foreclosure started again and stuff like that. That's out of our control. I mean, we can go ahead and proceed and tear the house down if that's what the order would entail. But there's a good chance you're not going to get your money back on it. And, usually you want to get your money back on these things.
You're getting a unified ouch from town council because we deal with our constituents. But it's almost like the education of the citizens is important through our website, Kim, where we have individual projects, if you will, in each one of your homes, if we're talking about non-residential or residential, would have a case and with an address. And we almost have to tell the people, here's the step we're in, here's the next step, so that people can look at it that live next door to this dump and say, okay, what's the next thing that's going to happen? Because otherwise they think nothing's happening.
The question is, legally, can we publicize all of this information step by step by step?
I would be careful of doing that. And the only reason I say that is, one, that's going to be very time consuming. And usually you've got one citizen, maybe two or three, that are interested in a particular property, and the rest of your citizenry doesn't care about that property because it's not in their neck of the woods. So usually what we do is we tell whoever the complainant is, look, if you don't see anything happening for a couple of weeks or whatever, call me and I'll tell you where we are and what we're doing. Okay. And that works out. It's worked out for almost 30 years that I've been doing this.
It hasn't worked out for the last year or so here.
Well,
I mean, that's,
yeah.
There's a lot more people. There's a lot more people than just call them the adjacent residents for a couple of these properties that have joined the choir,
right?
And rightfully criticized that there's a nuisance property that they consider a nuisance, and they don't understand what's going on, why it's going on, or where it's going. And so my concern is always, how do we get this word out and tell the people, rather than leaving them fretting through social media or pounding our emails and doing that kind of stuff.
Usually when there's a neighborhood that's complaining, there's one or two people that are kind of the leaders.
Yep.
And if you can inform those leaders, they take care of providing to the others. But I always tell those leaders also, if another citizen in your group has a particular question and they want to get it from the horse's mouth, call me. I will explain where we are and what we're doing. Okay. And like I said, that usually works well. I know we had one here that was unique. Exterior showed some problems, but not a lot. The key to the problem there was the interior, and trying to get into the interior was where we were running into difficulty because we didn't know who to contact. Because the person that was on the deed and the tax card, we were not able to contact him. He was in a home somewhere, and it looked like at that particular point, they had moved him from one home to another. And nobody could tell us where that home was. Okay, so we had no way of contacting him. And we needed to be able to do that to start the possibility of going in for an inspection. If it gets to a certain point, and I believe we ended up recently doing a warranted inspection on that particular property, and we were able to find out what we needed to find so we can move the process forward. But I understand that same property is now back into foreclosure again. So
it's been sold. The bid price, the agreed to price was $296,000. It was sold. It is. Let Dustin know that.
okay.
But that went on 6 years. That's the problem here. That went on 6 years of telephone calls. Help us, help us, help us. You were trying to, remember I met with you and Dustin out at the home and we went through things. You took pictures of exterior and so on.
Right.
That was great. But at the same time, what was happening, I'm not blaming you, because at the same time what was happening, we were trying to take the lead. The Master Association, the C-Trail was trying to take the lead, and everything was bouncing back and forth. Finally got it straightened out. It took a long time. Finally got it straightened out. The lead was taken. It finally got into foreclosure.
Yeah.
And of course, in North Carolina, you've got that time where you make a bid. You got 10 days. If somebody bids, you got 10 days. 10 days. That's what began happening here. But it's finally been done. It is done. I was told yesterday, $296,000. It's the best Christmas present those neighbors could ever have, they say.
Yeah. So as soon as we find out who the buyer was and it's officially in their name, then we can proceed to communicate with them and get the ball rolling. A lot of times when they buy those things out of foreclosure, they already know what it looks like and they've already got a game plan, so they're easier to work with. Hopefully that one will be done, in the next 6 months to a year. That would be great.
Now, what happened is one of the neighbors went to the courthouse yesterday and tried to find out exactly that information, and they wouldn't give him that information at all. Probably Dustin, you could call, or John, you could call, probably get that information.
Well, as soon as that commissioner's deed is recorded,
okay,
then we got access to it.
Okay.
So, and that sometimes takes a few days. If it just happened yesterday, probably no later than Monday we'll have access to it.
That's good.
So
That's good. So, Dustin, give you information there. Thank you.
that's it. Get on the ball.
Talk to John. John talks to Dustin. Let's get going.
All right. Once we get to the point where we're either boarding up the house or we're tearing it down, then it comes to the lien. And one of the things we want to make sure is that every cost related to that closure or that demolition becomes part of that lien,
including your costs.
including our cost. If you notice on any of the liens we've done in the past, there's an administrative part to that, an administrative invoice. And that deals with the time period that we spent on that particular project alone. And that, along with the demolition, the asbestos, the landfill cost, all of that, If we have to have the police department there on scene for any period of time, we want to get an invoice from the police department for how long that officer was there. And all that gets added in as part of that lien and filed at the courthouse and that. So hopefully in the not too distant future, you can get your money back on that. All right. Any other questions on that?
Can I just ask, this may be connected, but so Dustin is our code enforcement officer, as you know. You are, what would you call yourself? You are the same thing?
Yeah,
Same thing?
I'm a code
You
enforcement
advise him, but
He actually has a department under him
Yes.
of 2 other code officers. He's got Andy here that is here based on the continuing service hours that you have contracted with us. So he's here, boots on the ground, and to take care of those kinds of issues. I'm around in case you need any questions or anything. If Dustin or Carrie or Andy has any question on a particular thing, they call me, and I chime in on it, and hopefully we move it forward. Okay. If there's a particularly hairy situation, then we'll work around that.
so basically, Dustin's our code enforcement officer. He contacts Andy for needs, help, get you guys involved, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay.
And then I'm that extra hammer in the toolbox.
Okay.
All right. So when you get to a point where you got nothing better to do, work through this flow chart, and you'll see part of the answer to why it takes so long. What we always hope for is that when we go into these, that we're able to motivate the property owner to do something and do it quickly, even if we have to hold their hand and carry them through the process. And a lot of times we do, because like I said earlier, they do this once in a lifetime and we do this frequently. So, we've got the experience and they don't.
Does our unified development ordinances, or our rules of engagement, if you will, for the town, do they satisfy you? Do you think they're complete? They need to be worked on. I know we're going to be talking about a non-residential commercial properties here right after you.
Yeah. I wrote your minimum housing code. When you guys first hired us, I went through your ordinances, and you adopted amendments to those, including the housing code. Part of the reason we had to do that is because 160D had repealed the statutes related to 160A, minimum housing, zoning, and all of that. So we updated it to cover that, and a couple other things that were changes in the law that we incorporated in there. So for the most part, your housing code should be up to date, because there hasn't been any real rule changes since we updated those.
What is that code number?
The ordinance number for your housing
For
code?
our housing code.
160.
140.
Just plain 140? Thank you.
So,
Dot 10.
okay.
John, did you by chance go over the appeal, maybe so we can kind of understand the appeal process, so the council can understand, because some of that is delayed.
You'll have to repeat what he said because the people on home can't hear him. So it's
We did talk about the appeal process, but I can go a little more in depth if we need to. Any notice of violation, any order that we write, the property owner has a right to appeal it to the Board of Adjustment. If it's a nuisance, junk cars, minimum housing, non-residential, they've got 10 days in which to appeal to the Board of Adjustment. If it's a zoning related matter, they have 30 days from the date of the notice of violation or the order to appeal. And that's because the zoning regulations and the law stipulate that they will have 30 days. And there's a lot of other unique things that go into that are not in The other one is because it's zoning related. Once the property owner files the appeal, and they have to file it in writing to the town clerk, and we also ask them to notify the code officer, whoever issued the order, so that we know that it's being appealed, so we know to stop any action, any forward movement on that case. The reason for that is because it's like a stay, and we can't issue civil penalties. We don't go onto the property and clean it up or move forward on an order to close or demolish or repair. Once it's turned into the town, within that time frame, the 10 days, then the ball starts rolling and getting all the documentation and stuff gathered together so it can be presented to the Board of Adjustment chair, and they can schedule a time for that meeting. It could be their next regular scheduled meeting. It could be a special call meeting. That's not necessary, but there are situations that may arise where that's an important thought. As a general rule, the next scheduled meeting is fine because we're not going to take any action against them until they've been heard to the board by the Board of Adjustments on the appeal. Once the Board of Adjustments makes their decision and publishes their decision, then if they found in favor of the property owner, then we basically stop. If they found in favor that our decision was appropriate, then we go back and we adjust the time that the owner has because they've lost time while it was in the appeal process. So we adjust the time and we issue an extension based on that time. So if it was 45 days that it was in the appeal process before it was decided, we're going to give them 45 days on top of what we originally gave them. So if we were 10 days into the process and they still had 80 days, well, we're going to plug 45 back into there because we were on hold for 45 days. So they're still going to get their 90 days to do what we ordered them to do. It's just adjusting that deadline. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Charlie,
Okay.
turn it off.
Okay.
That's your phone? Is that
Your
your,
phone keeps ringing, Charlie.
All right.
is that your phone?
Yeah, it's a doorbell. I can't
Oh,
stop it.
it's the doorbell. Security.
Anything else related to the housing code?
That's good.
How about commercial properties?
This is
It's the next one.
this is where we're going.
That's where we're going, the next thing here.
Oh, okay.
We don't have a municipal code that references commercial, non-residential properties.
As we get started on this next one, it appears that many of these processes are very similar.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So it won't really take that long to go over this, but I want to go over the unique parts of it.
Thank you.
Okay. So I believe you have a copy of the non-residential buildings and structures ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. As you said, non-residential code mirrors minimum housing code process for the most part. It is authorized through a different section of the law, and the steps that we go through are very similar. We have to do an inspection, we schedule a hearing, we issue an order, all of that. The inspection standards are a little bit different. Our duties as a non-residential inspector are pretty much the same. We still have to go through the same process. The inspection, if we can't get in there with consent of the owner or the occupant, then we can go for a warrant. And same process. When we execute a warrant, we're going to take the police with us. We have been known, depending on the situation, to have building code go with us. We have had fire inspectors go with us because there are certain things in commercial buildings that fall under their realm. They're discussed in the non-residential code, but the details that they have to meet are developed by the fire code. All right. As with the housing code, if you turn to page 8 on this, you will see it's broke down very similar to the housing code. You've got 12 items that that any one of which becomes an issue. And I'm sorry, I told you 8, and it actually starts on 7. So in paragraph B on page 7, it says any building or structure shall be found to be especially dangerous to life and held unsafe by the inspector if the inspector finds any one of the following conditions exist in such building or structure. And then there's those next 12 items. So one of those, for example, the roof's caving in. That would be an issue. And automatically that would make it unsafe and in violation of the non-residential code. If you move on to paragraph C, then that gets into the other issues that are broke down, some of which are similar, but the degree of deterioration or dilapidation is where the importance comes in here. Under this section, it takes 5 or more of those to be considered unfit to occupy. And it goes on down through, it breaks it down: structural, egress, plumbing, electrical, all of that. If you get to section 141.15 on page 10, it talks about the option if we go in and there's violations but they're not severe, or there's, like on that second group, maybe only one of those is in violation, so it doesn't meet the 5 threshold, then we can issue a notice of violation, tell them this item is defective, you need to repair it, you got this many days to do it. So it's like a standard notice of violation that we issue, and we don't have to go through the hearing process and all of that. Okay. Investigation is the same. Complaint notice of hearing process is the same. Order to take action is the same. This is where one of the unique ones comes in. If you turn to page 12 at the top, this is under the section order to take corrective action, contents, and issuance. Paragraph C says an order may not require the repairs, alteration, or improvement to be made to a vacant manufacturing facility or vacant industrial warehouse facility to preserve the original use.
I'd love you to tell us why they're giving a special dispensation to those 2 uses.
Legislators.
In other words, because it's North Carolina?
Well, I'm sure there's other states that do it too, but again, these are specialty structures. These were built with a particular use intended, and they were using that use for decades in most cases. And we're not, under non-residential, we're not dealing with the use of the property as far as, what can go in there and what can't and so forth. We're requiring them to make the buildings safe. Okay.
Thank you.
What use goes in there later is going to be up to zoning.
That explains it. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Well, we had some old mills and stuff like that, textile mills and stuff like that. Those are a thing of the past for the most part. So making a textile mill, requiring a textile mill to be brought back up to where it can be an operational textile mill is out of the realm of what this is intended.
That tobacco just,
That's a biggie,
boom.
yes.
I understand.
That was probably number 1.
because they were dilapidated to begin with.
Yep.
So it's,
Yeah, there was a lot of unsafe
Can't they
situations there.
Marijuana in there?
All right. Then it goes on into, remedies. We can do a lien on the property. failure of the occupant to comply with the order to repair or demolish, those kinds of things. Now, here's another unique situation. If we have ordered a non-residential property to be boarded up, and in doing so, there's a different time period on this. And if you turn to 141.24, instead of 1 year like it is in the housing code, here it's 2 years. And then they also treat uniquely the manufacturing and industrial warehouse facilities even more uniquely because they get 5 years to be boarded up. So if you're doing a school or a shop or a store or something like that, they get 2 years. If you're doing the manufacturing facilities or warehouses, they get 5. So they can be boarded up for 5 years. Now, here's the stipulation on boarding something up. It has to be properly boarded and it has to stay properly boarded during that closure period. If it doesn't, we send them a notice and require them to board it back up. If we boarded it, then we're going to send them that notice, and if they don't do it, we're going to go back in and board it up because you've already ordered us to board it up one time. We're going to maintain it.
And we're charging them for that too, right?
Absolutely. Everything that we do on that property related to something like that, if it costs money, it's going to be charged.
You know, we're putting a lot of, I don't want to say rules and regulations, we're putting a procedure together for non-residential here. That's what we're doing with 141. We're all aware of what's going on in Raleigh with the Senate bill. I think it's 382. It has to do with, it has to do with a lot of things, but it seems like it's focused at affordability for not only construction, but for property owners and affordability to maintain their structures. And we're adding a procedure for our evaluation. Is that something that could in fact be kicked back at us?
I don't know that it can be kicked back at you, but what I've seen happen in the past is when they do these kinds of things, we let them sift through it and figure out what they're going to do, because with 160D, we waited 5 or 6 years for them to get their act together on it.
Okay, I remember.
And then they finally did. And then we were being told it's going to be 6 months to a year before this kicks in. And then, the governor signed it and it was effective that day. Nobody was prepared for that. So the best thing to do is to wait and see, and then evaluate what they decide and see how it affects any of your ordinances. And then we'll amend the ordinances at that time based on what, if any, changes we need to make.
Which is what we did with 160D. We had a mass edit of a whole bunch of things that we said, can't do that, can't do that, can't do this.
And then they waited a little while later, and then they came back with some other things that we had to go in and change. So
thank you for that clarification.
It's a very fluid thing with them. So, all right. So other than that, pretty much everything is the same. We've got general penalties process in here as we do in other ordinances. Here it's $100 a day, and it continues to accrue. One of the changes the legislation made is that years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, that zoning and these ordinances and stuff, they're not allowed to have criminal penalties anymore. So we clearly say in our ordinance that it is not criminal penalties, that is civil penalties only, and so we can collect those. But we're not stepping on the toes of the law.
Lisa, a question for you. On page 3, at the very bottom, we call it non-residential buildings or structures standard inspector, and we say a person delegated as such by the town council. I would assume intuitively that as of today, that's Dustin Graham. That if we have a conversation, it really should be with Dustin, because I don't know who the town council has delegated. I mean, unless it's you.
We made him the enforcement guy.
Well, when you signed a contract with us, you also delegated that authority to us.
Yeah, but you don't want us calling you.
Well, no, you call Dustin because he's in the chain of command that you've established here. But I mean, if you want to call me, I don't have a problem with that. I'll be more than happy to talk to you. But the chain of authority that you've established is through Lisa down to Dustin, and then Dustin to Andy, and I'm kind of hanging out here, and you call me when you want to.
That explains, because there was some conversation in my mind, and I think some of the councils, as to whether we're adding a person, but we don't. It fits into our existing system.
You're not adding a person, you're just adding a title to that person, because this is the title that the law says they'll be called. And
Okay.
that's it.
We need to add
That's
that
the
to
only
the job
difference. Okay, any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope I've been able to answer some questions and so forth for you.
One quick definitional type thing.
Okay.
If we have a residential home that is unoccupied for long periods of time, does that de facto become a non-residential building, or does it
No.
always stay residential just because
They're
of
two separate animals.
Okay.
If a residential structure is vacant for 2 years or more, it's considered abandoned under the housing code, and you can deal with it. You can actually, under the housing code, if you have an abandoned non-residential structure, you could handle it under that. But you will, once you adopt this, you'll have that option under here also.
There's one particular non-residential structure in the town that has caused a lot of us getting either questions from our citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a case of a particular dwelling where a tree fell in after a storm. The top was gone. They finally repaired the roof, and it's still sitting there. It's totally closed. It's not, nobody's going in or out.
Mm-hmm.
The question is what recourse do we have to have them put that back into the condition it should be in?
It's a house.
No, non-residential.
It's a structure.
Structure.
A commercial structure. But work does continue at a snail's pace on it. And I think
an outlet at a time.
that's the frustration that our planning department has. They do just enough.
What was in the building before? Just
Well,
Restaurant.
I don't know that we want to be
Restaurant?
public as
Okay.
and identify it. But
if
do you drink coffee in the morning?
I always drink coffee in the morning.
Never mind that.
Okay, it's a non-residential building, so once you adopt this ordinance, you can open a case on that building and go forward with that. Okay.
But it's not a safety issue. It's
It's an eyesore.
it's a progress issue.
Yeah, it's a progress issue.
And I'm sure Gary hears about it once a week, as he does the steel framed skeleton out on Sunset Boulevard by the old Sugar Kingdom.
That's the one across from Hardee's.
Yes.
Yeah, I've looked at that several times when I was here, and I looked at it this morning as I'm driving in. There's really not anything you can do on that.
It's not unsafe except when the kids skateboard there with the chaseways sticking up that they can
Yeah.
follow on.
The only thing I see there is you could, under your nuisance ordinance, make them clean up some of the building material stuff that's laying there. Other than that, the structure is structurally sound. There's no defects in it that I could see. It's basically like a pavilion.
And the owner is really trying too. So
One additional question, sorry. A standalone garage, house with a separate garage, and if that falls into deterioration, does that fall into residential or non-residential building?
I would handle that under the housing code because it's a residential accessory structure.
It doesn't have to be connected, though.
It doesn't have to be connected, no.
Thank you.
And depending on how dilapidated it is, you may be able to go after it as your nuisance ordinance. Like, if a tree fell on it and it's just, yeah. Okay.
John, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
break.
Yeah, what are we doing now? We don't have anything till 10.
10 o'clock.
Yeah, and I
Oh,
don't
you'll just need to take a break until 10 because we did a time certain until 10.
yes. Thank you.
We'll take about a 45-minute break. We'll start back at 10 o'clock. Great. I'd like to welcome everybody back to the meeting. We will be going into our paid parking program plan discussion. Mr. Hargraves, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, very much. If people can recall where we were last Monday, we sort of had to stop because we ran out of time. We had on Objective 3, and that was in the packet, Objective 3, items for council to consider and approve. The first thing, number 1, was approval of paid parking on the island. Council came to consensus on that. Number 2 is where we stopped, and that was the selection of the vendor who would be responsible for the whole town implementation of a total parking plan for our town. And what we did originally is we received bids. We advertised for bids, received bids. They came in, had to come in by November 21st. The firms that submitted, there were 4 firms that submitted bids. Elite Parking Services, Pivot, Surfcast by AutoConnect, and Parking Management Services were the 4 companies. Lisa, Charlie, and myself became a committee to look at the bids. We did that. We set up what we called qualifications. We set up 12 of those. Qualifications were nothing more than us talking about what we'd look for in a parking management firm. And we did that. I'm not going to go over all 12 of those with you, but to let you know, they all pertain to what we thought Sunset Beach would need as far as a parking manager was concerned, a parking management company was concerned. What then occurred, we as the committee came to a consensus on who we thought would be the best. But what happened after that is 3 of our council members who were not on that committee came to us, and they had questions regarding the qualifications, and they had questions regarding the bids that were submitted. So what we did is we got back together again, but then I went out and met with the 3 council members one-on-one. We talked about qualifications. We talked about answering their questions regarding the bidders, discussed the pros and cons of the bids, and each council member was certainly given sufficient data on each of the bids to make what we think be a very knowledgeable decision. And I want to thank those 3 council members. This action forced all of us to reevaluate, go back and dig deeper into the qualifications of each of the bidders. And I believe that it's helped us make a real good, will help us make a real good decision this morning. So what I want to do now is turn the proceedings back to the mayor, because it's time for a motion, it's time for a second, and it's time for discussion.
In regards to the company, correct?
Yes, sir.
What is the pleasure of council in regards to a company for your paid parking information?
May I just kind of clarify first that it's a special meeting, but we will make a vote that decides on the company this morning if we all reach a consensus. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
So,
What's the pleasure of council?
a motion?
We need a motion. I'll make my statement would really be under discussion after a motion is made.
Looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion that Surfcast by AutoConnect be the company that's chosen. Should we go paid parking?
I'll second that,
Second.
Any more discussion?
please.
Go ahead.
It certainly is a responsibility of town council to closely look at this whole paid parking process. And the first step in my mind is to just what we're doing now, to select a subcontractor, a vendor to help us with this, because there's all kinds of software, there's things that have to be integrated with our police department. I have satisfied myself by having an opportunity to review the proposals or the bids that were submitted to the town. And I agree with the motion that's been made by Councilman Posdel about AutoConnect as being the selected one. I think where some of the other proposals were complete, some were not, but were complete. They have shown me the experience level, the similarities between other beach towns that they're working with, and particularly the features and benefits of their software. Even though paid parking is moving forward, we still haven't voted on it yet, but moving forward, there's going to be a significant amount of time when paid parking is not in effect, off-season, overnight, when our police department needs to be able to hopefully integrate themselves with the AutoConnect software to help them with their law enforcement duties during those non-paid times, if you will. I want to thank Mike Hargraves and Charlie Nern for their hard work with this parking committee, which has gone on for quite a while. And I'm sure it's exhaustive, but it's complete. It needs to be just that. And also Ms. Anglin, who together with Charlie and Mike evaluated the bids and helped answer questions for the other members of Town Council.
Go ahead, John.
I'd like to second. I agree with what Peter said, and just point out one of the key things. And in my looking at what was going on, we still have all of the decisions to be made on what the details are from start to finish. All we're doing now is selecting a company. None of the other decisions associated with paid parking, where, when, how, who, and anything else have been made. And looking at the experience and what they have done, I think AutoConnect is in a good position to assist us by helping to identify all of those decisions and advising council and town staff on how to make those decisions. So I'm very comfortable with AutoConnect. Thank you.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Seems like Mike and I have been reading the parking thing for
Are you on, Charlie?
Are you on?
Speaker.
seems like Mike and I have been reading this. Test. Maybe I'll speak up. First thing I want to do is, again, thank the parking committee. What a great to work with. And everybody on the committee had one or two things that they were mostly concerned with. But the end result was everybody working together what was best for the town. And it was certainly a pleasure working with these citizens. AutoConnect has been handling our collections, taking care of any of that paperwork, relieve somebody at the police department from doing that. And as we get into this, they will handle everything. And that's the best part of this. Frees up police for other things, other town staff. They meet all of our needs. And as far as I was concerned, they were head and shoulders above even the one closest one. So I'm going to support them.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
One last thing from me. The smooth functioning of our businesses for parking for their customers, and particularly parking for their customers is penultimate, but the parking for their staff. We have people making minimum wage that obviously can't afford to pay for parking. So those kinds of details, to bootstrap over what Mr. Corbett just said, those are the kind of details that we still have to work out. Times of operation, how much it will cost, who would have to pay for parking? Is it our taxpayers? There's these details we need to work out, but until we have a vendor on board that we can sit down with and say, here's what we want to do, show us how your software will allow us to do just this, and then maybe tweak it and come up with some ideas or some issues that we probably haven't even thought of yet. But we continue to be sensitive to all the emails we get. And even though I go, oh boy, here's 3 more, when I read them, I say, boy, that's a good point, and then I make a margin note. So please input your needs.
One other thing, and it really doesn't have to do with the vendor, but I think while we have a parking plan, quote, tentative for the island, nothing's carved in granite on that plan. So there are things we have to look at more than once to make sure it's going to work. It's not a fait accompli that what's on that plan is going to be exactly what happens. Correct, Michael?
Okay.
Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, we go back to September. We passed the parking plan in September that the citizens have worked on for a long time, the citizen committee. And council made 5 changes to that plan. So we have that plan, but there's particulars of that plan that will be worked on by whoever we choose as the vendor, that's for sure.
Okay.
Any more discussion? I got a motion and a second. There's no more discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay. So that's a major step for the town. Now we have a vendor, and that vendor becomes someone we can talk to, deal with, give us feedback, give us help, and certainly mold a parking plan that's right and perfect for Sunset Beach. Now we'd like to continue down through Objective 3 now. I'd like to continue down through Objective 3. And the next one I want to talk about is not even there, but it's something that has come up recently that we've got to get going on if we're going to manage parking on this island. And I would like to make a suggestion that the council come to consensus on this next step in our what it is. It's very important that the town begin the process of working with property owners on Main Street, Canal Drive, to clear right-of-ways, designate driveway locations, determine locations of mailboxes in order to set up parking on these very valuable parking streets. This step will take, and this is what really hit us, this step is going to take considerable time. It'll mean going to each individual property owner and working through those 3 questions with the individual property owners. And so that's something that will take quite a bit of time. Town staff needs to start now in order for us to get the best chance to be ready for the 2025 or be close to be ready for the 2025 parking season. Does any council member have any comments about that?
Couldn't agree more.
Needs to be done soon.
One thing, this is not, taking back the right of way is not going to be just on the island. It's going to be on the mainland also. But this is a long process. And, but, you know, we're not just picking the island out because of parking, but it will be town-wide.
And as Mike, he stated, I was going to say alluded to, individual property owners will have direct input into this. There are rules and regulations that are appropriate for the town to follow as far as utility easements, right-of-ways. However, we have all said privately that we need to be sensitive to property owners. And that's certainly going to be high on our list.
If there's no other comments, can I say, anybody disagree, or could we come to consensus on getting to work on this? That's
Yes.
the key.
I agree.
In order to do that, we have to make some other
We'll get-
steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one thing I want to say is that I'd rather do this right than push it fast.
Mhm.
Let's, we all want to say, oh, we'll start at the beginning of April 1st or whatever for the beginning season. But if we're not doing this correctly, I don't think we should rush into it. I mean, we have to be very careful because there's dollars to be spent that we're not.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's got to be a deliberate, methodical,
Mhm.
documented process.
That's right. That's right. Is everybody agreeing consensus? We get going on that? Okay, that's great. That's great. Now we'll move down to Objective 3. We'll move down to 3 and 4. We're going to put those together. 3 and 4, we'll put those together. 3 was approve the lease agreement of the Boulevard lot for town parking. And 4 is to approve the plan to construct the boulevard lot based on surveys and plans submitted by McGill. With this now, this is not complete yet. This is not complete yet. These are two very important decisions that the council needs to take. Now, not the council, but the staff needs to take the steps on. So we're asking Lisa today, these are what we call to-do items. We're asking Lisa today to work with the staff to conclude the ongoing negotiations regarding the lease for the parking lot and to finalize the plans for the construction of the parking lot. So we can see both of those, get the lease, approve it, see the actual final drawings for the parking lot and approve those.
Mike, to be clear, what you just said certainly makes complete sense. But there really are two parallel paths here that are somewhat dependent on each other, but not exclusively. Working on Main Street Canal and other areas to define parking spots and delineate driveways is one process that must take place. And we have ordinances and municipal codes that regulate that. The second thing is what is contemplated by town council and town staff is the standalone parking lot, town controlled parking lot along the west side of Sunset Boulevard. But that parking lot does not control whether or not we have a defined parking on Main Street or paid parking. It just is another step in that process. But they can move on independently. If all of a sudden the parking lot has a snag for 90 days or however long, it doesn't mean that we can't move forward with Main Street and Canal and other areas to define driveways with the property owners.
Lisa, are you okay with that? What we just talked about? Okay. Okay. So that's in your to-do list now. The next step is we're going to skip 5 right now, but the next step will go to objective 5 and objective 6. Objective 5 dealt with 2 ordinances, 2 key ordinances in order to help us set up parking. Again, this we're looking for Lisa, and the 2 ordinances are 7206 and the 7207. These we're asking Lisa to submit again to Chief Claymore for his final review because we made some changes again. There are a couple of changes that need review and his blessing, and then these can come back to council for approval. Objective 6 now, though, is a UDO change. It's a UDO change from Article 3.24A1, driveways must be submitted to the planning board and come back and for us finally to approve it. And so that may take a little bit of time based on how this always works for UDO changes.
I think Lisa said it's going to go on the next planning board agenda, which is the 19th of
That's right.
January. I'm sorry, 19th of December. So
Okay.
it's next week.
It'll get going then. That's good. That's good. So any comments from council on that now?
Do we have to have a public hearing on that as well? But can the public hearing be the same town council meeting as our vote?
Yes, but that will not be January 6th. The planning board recommendation will come to you on January 6th. If they
And
so
we
choose
schedule a
at the
public hearing.
19th.
And then
Then you'll
February.
schedule a public hearing in February
Got it.
and
Okay.
adopt it in February.
Assuming the planning board has approved it.
Exactly.
Mhm. This one, again, has to do with driveways on the island we're particularly interested in. So that's good. We'll move on that one. And then we go back to, let me go back to number 5 under objective 3. And this is pretty key. This is now we'll look at Auto Connect here a little bit. This is pretty key to what needs to be done next, but this is the huge step that John was talking about. Major step in the implementation of this total parking plan is to work out and put together all the many details needed to be completed. We ask our new parking management firm, Auto Connect, to work with Lisa, staff, and council members to help us understand all the details that must be agreed to in order to put a completed parking plan in place. And together, submitting all those details to council for approval. So there's a big step ahead of us now in putting all those details together. We have finished the work. That this goes through all the objectives here. This is what we've got to get done now. This is what we got to do. And so it's time now just to go to work. And I would like to make one final statement here and remind everybody, and we continually live this in the parking committee. Our parking committee continually stated that the two goals of this parking plan was to, number one, manage parking, and number two was promote a safe environment on our island and for our citizens and our visitors. And that still remains the goal as we move forward. And so it's time to get going. It's time to get working on all this now. Time for the details. And so hope everybody up here is ready to go. And Charlie and I certainly are, that's for sure. Might as well keep going, Charlie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I agree
Any
with
comment?
all. I agree with all that, but I want to reiterate what Councilman Larkin said earlier. We still welcome emails from citizens on specific details that they are concerned with, and among us, we have been compiling a list of things that still need to go back and be checked and to be taken care of, and we will feed those to AutoConnect, and then continue to ask and request the advice from AutoConnect on how to handle these and work them into a plan.
Continuation of John's, since McGill did their initial, call it rough layout, there's been a number of things happen. Some vacant lots have become occupied with new homes. Business traffics have changed. There's things that, I guess what I'm really saying is nothing's locked in stone. And even as the parking program continues on over the years, there will be adjustments made as to who parks where based upon the conditions as they may change.
Yeah, we've always talked about this being a flexible parking plan. That's the key. Things change in the island, and we have to ebb and flow with those changes, and we will. We'll keep in touch. We'll keep working on these things. We'll keep bringing up new ideas probably as the years go by. And as we talked about with the parking committee, let's see what works and what doesn't, because all the recommendations we made were recommendations. We can't guarantee any of them. We think they'll work. We think they're going in the right direction, and we think it'll bring a safer environment onto that island. So we have to be flexible.
This wasn't something we just made up. We studied the other islands that have paid parking, looked at how they were doing it, how they process it, and this is the best that we could come up with. But I do have to say that we've had our beach house for 30 years and we lived here permanently for 22 years. And I've seen parking committees come and go and nothing was ever accomplished. Again, I want to give the committee a pat on the back because we were able to come together. There were no fist fights like previous committees. And say, and like Mike said, and Pete and John, this is all fluid. If we do something and we see it doesn't work, then we can change it.
I just make sure we all understand that what we did, we agreed on. So everybody understands outside world that we agreed on Servcast by AutoConnect being the parking management firm we're dealing with. We haven't agreed on any of the paid parking, who's free, and everything else. That all comes when we get all the numbers together from what you're going to be doing on a lot, what we're doing as far as the streets. Got to put that all together and take a look at the bottom line and see where it starts from. So that has not been marching. We're not going that far ahead yet. That's one of the steps that we have to take in the next couple of months.
Those are the details, and that's what needs to be worked out on this whole thing.
Well, I do need a couple of things.
Oh, no.
Oh.
We hear this all the time.
Objective number 4,
Yes.
the startup cost. number one, I do need you to at least recognize that we will be spending that money now. We need to have the surveying work done. We need the curb stops. We need the signs and the poles. All that has to be ordered. So I need you to head nod that you recognize we're going to start spending money.
There's also going to be some details, though. One, details what kind of signs, how many signs, where the signs go. Those are going to be kind of predicated on how the driveways and right-of-ways and parking gets designated and put there. And then you have curb stops and driveway markers and stuff like that. What actually are we going to use? And that needs to be something that works with AutoConnect. It works with our enforcement capability. It works with NCDOT requirements on what could be put in the roads and the right-of-ways and what cannot be. So there are a bunch of decisions that need to be made before we start spending money.
Are you asking for a general consensus as opposed to it will be $15,000 for surveying Main Street? Because we don't know how much that will be yet. Okay.
Yeah, just a general consensus, if you all recognizing that we are spending money that is not budgeted at this point.
Out of the general fund.
Out of the general fund.
Which is taxpayers' money.
Which is
Upfront,
taxpayer funds.
with no guarantee yet.
Mm-hmm.
With the yes, there is no guarantee, just like the mayor said. We could hit a snag and have spent the money in vain and not have a paid parking program. I would highly doubt that'll happen, or I certainly hope it won't happen. But it's the goal, it's my goal, that money be reimbursed through the paid parking fees and the penalties that are assigned to that parking program.
And we have a track record of other communities that have initiated paid parking, and they have showed a positive track record of recovering the cost of putting the program together. So it's not without precedent. It's not without experience, and it's considered highly likely that we will be able to recover the funds in the general fund, even though we can't say exactly how long that's going to take.
Over a long period of time.
Over a long period
But
of time.
all the statements that's always been made about the taxpayers never pay has never been true, because they will pay up front in hopes and speculation that the funds will be returned one day.
Yeah.
Whether me and you here to live to see it or not, somebody down the road, hopefully it'll be paid for.
Well,
Again, we got the track record of communities that have done this successfully.
every district that we establish to date is the same thing as what the mayor is referring to. If we pave a gravel road in the town because the residents have the majority vote on that they want it done, we foot that bill. Now, it's reimbursed through a paving district, which reimburses the general fund. But everything we do, and it would be my vision that we have an obligation to help facilitate things like that for our citizens on very unique situations and individual projects, such as paid parking, such as delineating parking on the island. Just like our paving, just like our dredging programs, all of them do the same thing. If you can say that we're the bank for the citizens, but it's a temporary bank with the idea that we're going to have a program that is realistic, so that those monies can be reimbursed back into the general fund.
And once again, just to clarify on the general fund, that is our bank account, our savings account. We have had a policy for at least the last 9 or 10 years to maintain a 75% level in our general form, in our general fund, to be used in a dire emergency where we suffer severe damage from some kind of a storm, natural event, whatever it happens to be, which incapacitates us. But it provides 75% of the fund to operate for a year based on our own resources. The other 25% is, if you will, the capital fund that we have access to enable us to do things, to take steps to improve the town, whether it's roads, whether it's parking management, whether it's other purchases that we make. And in this case, we think on the parking program, at least 5 of us are confident that we will recoup that money, and I would say within a reasonable 4 or 5 years. But I can't say that for certain either, but that's just based on experience of the other communities that have initiated paid parking. We're not just pulling this out of our hat and saying this is what's going to happen.
But
I
what the mayor
wanna-
said is it needs to be stated, and Miss Anglin said it at our square table meeting the other day, where there was a conversation, a thread of conversation amongst us that was talking about the parking program being self-funding and profitable for the town. And Miss Anglin stopped us and said, "Time out, town council. People need to know that this money is initially going to come out of the general fund until paid parking can reimburse it." So I thank her for bringing that up, because it was obvious to me, but I'm sure it was not obvious to other people. And the mayor is highlighting that now too, appropriately.
One thing I want to add, and I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. There are plenty of town residents who don't go to the beach. Some of them come here because it's a great place to live. Some of them come here just to golf. Taxpayers that do not use the beach or don't normally go to the beach should not have to pay for parking. I'm talking about the tax dollars, their tax dollars paying for it. So that's why we have gone with paid parking. Something's got to pay for it besides the taxpayers. Taxpayers will benefit from this, but let those day trippers and everyone else, let them pay for it, because we don't get any tax money from them.
Charlie, you're kind of confusing 2 things. One
I'm sorry.
is who gets free parking on the island in terms of taxpayers paying it. And that's a detail that has to be defined. There are a lot of different categories. But you included in there that same thing, that the general fund, which is taxpayer money, is going to be used to fund this. 2 separate things. We're using the general fund the way it's designed to be used to finance a project to benefit the town that will be, in this particular case, we anticipate it'll be reimbursed, but it'll still be taxpayer money to be used. It doesn't matter whether they use the island or they use the beach or they don't use the beach. And then I think the concern you have is once the details get worked out, and if it turns out to be paid parking, is who gets free parking. And that's one of the details that we have to work out. And in principle, that's what we agree on.
I probably didn't state that as well as I should have. The parking fees are going to pay back to the general fund. And when that money gets paid back from parking revenue, that means that there's no taxpayer money used. We'll use it temporarily, but not forever.
And I have 2 other things if you're comfortable. The dates of operation and the time of the daily operation. Are you comfortable with saying, April 1, March 1, October 30, September 30?
Isn't that some of the details?
That's,
though, we wanted
that's a
to work
detail
out?
we haven't debated, discussed.
I think once we have a contractor on board, we can resolve that quite quickly. But as of right now, I'm not prepared, because I want input from the subcontractor. Somebody may say, no, you really want to go to October 1st, or no, you want to stop it on Labor Day.
Or Memorial Day.
Yeah, and I want to get input from a professional who's done it before other places.
Well, we're still going to have a public hearing on this, because we certainly want to hear what the citizens say.
I don't know that there is a public hearing.
We're just going to go and pass these without I thought there was a public hearing on this.
There'll be a public hearing on the ordinances.
Yes, which is what we haven't gotten to yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we got to work on those.
Which brings up the topic which allows people to say what they want in a broad sense about paid parking or parking on the island. Yes.
Mhm.
But I'm uncomfortable, I'm comfortable broad brushing Miss Anglin's request about there are going to be some immediate costs that we need to, in concert with the vendor, work out those details, but then be ready to get the stuff and do it, install it. So I agree
For
with that.
example, there's surveying to be done.
Yes, but she's asking for an agreement in principle, not an agreement to the specific dollars.
Right.
We have scope dollars right in front of us here, which show the order of magnitude that we're agreeing to.
Mhm. Okay. All right.
I have
Yeah.
a question.
Oh, go ahead.
As long as we're looking for dollars, okay? We have, and I'm jumping ahead, we have on our council business number 3, which is the rebuild, basically redoing the parking lot over at the park.
Yes.
My question is, why do we have to do that this year? That's in another, what, 300,000?
Bring that up.
Why
when
don't we talk about it
Wait till
Well,
later in the meeting when
That's
it's
mutually
scheduled.
exclusive to this.
I know.
okay?
Okay, Lisa, is that it? You got any more? You're happy? Are you happy? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Merrick, goes back to you. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Very much appreciated. And your detailed comments, very much appreciated. So go ahead.
All right, so you got up to that part. Do you have anything else to discuss in it?
No.
Well,
So you're
we,
done with the
we need
parking lot
to,
then?
we need to vote
got-
on 7206,
7206?
yeah,
We-
which is objective
The ordinance
5,
change?
the ordinance change.
They're going to Ken.
They're going to Ken
They're going to Ken
To be
for
approved
approval.
before
for
they
he's going
come
to
back.
approve
for
it
a-
and come back to us.
Before they come back for a
Okay.
vote, correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
and we
And-
wait for the driveway ordinance to come back from the planning
okay,
board.
all right,
So-
I understand that. I see there's fines here that Ken needs to have direct input into, yes.
All right, so auto's the one you selected. That's done.
Yes, sir.
And that's all your parking stuff for today, correct?
It's all the parking stuff for moving forward. That's not just it. Now we can go. A lot of things have been decided here to move forward, so
All right.
a little bit.
All right,
Go ahead.
next. There's nothing else to do with parking. We're gonna move on now to the council business. Establishment of the Tree City USA budget.
Isn't there was there $2?
Mm-hmm. And you've actually already established the budget. You're just actually establishing the line item now, and it will be included in the environmental protection budget for the $9,300 under community forestry program.
So you're just taking that money and assigning it to that line item.
Correct.
What's the pleasure of council? in
I would like to
regard
make a
And
motion.
there were
There's
two
ano-
items,
there's another-
two items
there's
on
another
there,
item here now.
And then the grinder, the emergency grinder pump at Fire Station 2. Sorry.
which we already paid for,
Mm-hmm.
and that.
Got a question on the grinder. And it doesn't have to do with approving it. But has there any discussion been made of going to the Brunswick Water and Sewer and find out if we can get a deal like I have at my house where I pay X dollars a month, and if anything goes wrong, they replace it?
That was that was allowable at the concept when it was brand new. I don't think within Brunswick County we could go, if I didn't opt to do it just like you did, I don't believe I can opt into it now.
Well, we just put a new one in.
Well,
Replacing or
Yeah.
put a new, first time?
Replace it.
but they put one in, you didn't.
I know.
I have inquired about that, and they said that if I didn't opt to do it on day one, that I can't try to opt in 3 years, 5 years later. Now, if a brand new one was put in, I don't know what that does to it, because that was not my question
Okay.
to them.
All right.
But they
I was
said,
throwing
if you
that
didn't
idea
opt in the beginning, you can't opt in now because it's sputtering, and you want to now get us to cover a warranty on it.
It has nothing to do with the budget amendment, because we already spent that.
All right, you started a motion, Pete. Do you want
Yes.
to continue it?
I'd like to make a motion that we establishment of the Tree City USA budget. Should I read this whole thing?
You don't have to.
No.
It's a
And
budget
to-
amendment ordinance that talks about
Budget amendment number 2.
Yes. Dated December 2nd, 2024, Tree City, USA, and then the grinder.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next up, pornography on the government networks and device policy. This is just tidying this up, getting it ready to go for the thing.
Yep,
Each one of
this
y'all
is-
read over this.
This is just coming down from Raleigh, a requirement for all municipalities to adopt this ordinance, this policy to go in the personnel policy.
Pleasure of council.
I just,
Go ahead.
uh,
So I was going to make.
I have something I'd like council to consider as a change in wording. On packet page 28, towards the very, very bottom, it has the, for disciplinary action or suspension, demotion, or dismissal must be approved by the town administrator. I'd like to have council consider and our human resources director. Now that we're not used to having a human resources director. And I think in a case like this where somebody's being suspended or dismissed, I'd like to have that input from the HR director.
Should it be approved by or recommended by the HR director and then approved by the town administrator?
Okay, I
I
hadn't
don't-
thought that deeply into the wording, but Ms. Anglin, what do you think?
I think it could go either way.
Are you saying it could remain like it is, or are you saying?
No, I think the HR director needs to be added.
Oh, okay.
And I wrote town administrator and human resources director. So I just inserted and human resources director after the word administrator.
That's fine.
Yep.
Okay, good, good.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the pornography on government networks and device policy along with the change made.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Sunset Boulevard North and Parking Area Rebuild Contract Award.
You gonna talk about this, Lisa, or?
We need to figure out where Dustin is. Richard, thank you.
He probably didn't expect this to get here this fast.
Right. And while we're waiting for Dustin, I can hit on the key points.
Okay.
This project came about with the test that we did this past summer with adding the additional parking spaces in front of Dave's and the park. In addition to that, this project also looked at designating where the travel lanes are and for the boat ramp area, for those lanes to be designated also. So it's not just adding parking spaces for the park. It is making that a safer area by using a different material in the roadway, which would be the pavers, just like are in the town parking lot now. And that break helps motorists delineate that they have left a roadway and are entering a parking area as they're coming through, which would promote them to slow down. To where right now it looks like a roadway. So that was the thought process behind this project.
Can the pavers handle that traffic?
It's not a yard paver. It's a traffic paver. It's a special thickness gauge. The compressive strength of the concrete is different.
And they're pervious? Or the,
Yep.
They're pervious not because they're pervious, but the
Yeah.
joints that are open between them are
Yeah.
15%, which allows.
Allowing it to stay as it is. We will be able to use money we're going to use for this for the initiation of some of the parking on the island, as well as repairing roads, general roads, because you're using the Powell funds for the roads. But I'm just looking for some way that we're not, if we don't need it, I don't want to spend it.
This would not be general fund use. This will be POW bill use.
Is this power bill for the whole thing, including the roads that are going to be topped and so on?
Mm-hmm.
So it'll all be power bill money. Okay.
The situation first of all, I love going to the concerts, and I go to just about, I think I missed one this year. Um, But during our market, during our special events we have like Sunset at Sunset and the Christmas market and the concerts, the area out there is not defined properly, I don't feel. Larger pickup trucks, hitches stick out into the roads. It doesn't look good in my mind. And I know there's been some conversations that have come, emails that have come to me saying, why are you spending all this money to give 4 more spaces? My concern
more.
isn't for 4 or however how many more.
19.
Okay, however many more. That's not the number is not important to me. It's to have something out there that properly delineates parking to make it safer. People are going through to the boat ramp that don't give a rat about what's going on at the town park, and they just think they're going to bulldoze through. People have said that we're knocking a whole bunch of trees down. Well, we are not taking any regulated or heritage trees down in this process on the park side. We're taking some pine trees and some other trees that probably aren't very pretty anyway, because we have to shift traffic over so that we don't interfere with Dave's area. And we're still allowing a considerable spot for boats to park as they go in and out of Dave's. We're giving them consideration on property that really belongs to the town. But they're a business that supports the town. So, Mike, you bring up an interesting point. I think we could say that about anything we're spending. I just don't like going through this summer concert with the parking as disorganized as it is out there right now.
Well, and the question I have is because we're parking for the parking area specifically, we have 50 times a year we use it between the concerts and the market.
Well, but it's used every day for the park too. But yes, you make a point. It's not 100% full except when we're having events in the park. Yes.
Let's go to Dustin now and see what he has.
So in addition to that parking lot, we incorporated 3 other projects into this bid for you all to consider. And these aren't anything new. You've known about these.
Yes.
4th Street property owners came to us a couple of years ago requesting 4th Street to be paved. We went out for bids at that time, which was right after COVID, and the bids were through the roof. So you all chose to delay that. So in this bid, we've included the 4th Street paving. We've also included a section of Mill Slough Lane, and we've also included, the boat ramp area.
Continuing the
parking.
paving down towards the boat ramp. a little
Right.
bit.
Right.
Correct.
So the figures that he'll give you are inclusive of those. So you can do 1, 2, or 3, or none.
So, question please.
No, go
The pavers extend from Shoreline Drive west down to the boat ramp?
No, just the parking area.
Just where
Just the
vehicles
parking
where
park.
the
area.
designated parking in the road will be.
Okay.
The other areas are repaving, milling and repaving because
Right.
the paving needs to be replaced. And Mill Slough,
Yeah.
Slough, that would be, that's an area that has been washboarding for some time. And the neighbors, Dustin and I have met out there with them. It is something that needs to be done. But to mill that area down would have been extremely expensive per square foot. So Dustin, I think I agreed 100%, decided let's wait until we have the Dave's Outpost paver installation where we've got to bring the milling machine in. Set up and transport is the huge cost for that milling machine. But we can also do other areas within the town while it's been mobilized locally here.
Right.
Um,
Now, the
So-
4th Street property, the paving of that road,
That's a question.
we will go back to those property owners, make sure that they still carry a majority for that to be paved, and then that will be a special assessment, like we were talking earlier.
is
And
that
when
a
we go
change
back,
of-
we will know how much that assessment's going to be.
Correct.
Is that a separate line item in this bid?
It is.
Okay, so we know exactly what to tell them.
hmm
Gotcha.
And so if they say no, we just don't
We
do
just
it.
don't do it.
Just don't do it and
Correct.
save the money. Okay. All right.
is the additional pavement area from the parking down towards the boat ramp, that's another line item as well? Or is that, so we would have the option of either doing that or not doing that at our own volition?
Correct.
We could, it's
It was
not
an alternate
binding?
bid in this.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Can I ask another question too? I asked earlier about Powell bill money, and I understand that's money comes from the state. Obviously, it's not taxpayers' money. But when we get done with this, now I don't know exactly what the figures are yet, but you generally probably know. This, once that's done, will our Powell bill fund still have monies to do the planned roadways we wanted to do this year? Or are we using all the Powell bill money to do this?
We just used it for this. We didn't put anything else in Powell to do this year except for this.
But this, will this drain our Powell bill fund, or will we have
No.
money still?
Should have some money left.
Okay. But you, normally you plan each year to do so many repaving jobs per
Right.
year. And just, we want to carry through that also, because other roads obviously need paving
Yeah.
in the regular routine that we use. Now, I know we haven't done a lot of paving in the last few years because of the expense was so ridiculous, and we
Right.
backed that up.
And because it's a continuing target with all the development going on around us, roads are
Yeah.
getting chewed up. If we go in and try to fix something and there's still a development with 100 homes that's being built and they're driving over it with ready mix trucks, and
That's right.
and there's no sense in, we need to wait
Mhm.
on those and do, I want to say Band-Aids to make it passable, usable, but not to do a full-blown paving and have it ripped up again.
I would like to see us look at, and you're looking at the Powell bill, probably for next year or whatever. Once the bridge is done, I'd like to see somebody take a hard look at redoing the cut-through road that people have been using for the last 13, 14, 15 months.
Clubhouse.
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 Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
That needs
because
it.
the shoulders are starting to collapse
Mhm.
and the trucks coming through because they come through.
That's
It's a
exactly
cut-through.
what I mean.
Yeah,
Yes,
we
you're
were.
right.
Yeah.
We
I
were. Once
support
that was done and everything, and all the traffic slacked off. Yeah, we were going to take a look at
Yeah.
that. Yes.
And they still have Gulls Landing currently under construction right there. And they have a couple more places,
Well,
the reserve that they're talking about getting started before too long.
hmm So
That
we'll
one
take,
should be a priority because we put a lot of stress on those roads
For sure.
through all this stuff here.
we'll take a hard look at that once that's back open.
It'd be sure nice if North Carolina would let us put a fee on developers for, but we live in North Carolina and we are not allowed to do that,
It's a developer state, Pete.
unfortunately.
And the other Clubhouse Road is a major paving job. I mean, it gets 90 feet wide in places, and that's
Oh, yeah,
there's a lot of paving to do there, and it's going to be quite expensive. So
When we done
You ready?
the evaluation like 3 years ago, it was already over $2 million to redo that one road,
just the one road.
just the one road.
Can you share with us the bid? I'm
Yes.
on the edge of my seat.
Okay. Jens LLC is the first one.
Can you say that again?
Jens, Jen, possibly yes, Jens LLC.
Okay, Jim's Ellison. Okay.
Their lumps. I'm gonna give you the lump sum, then I'm gonna give you the alternates, then I'll give you the total.
Okay.
And the lump sum is for the parking lot itself, $468,440 even.
That's only for the parking lot.
That's just the parking lot.
Parking lot. Okay.
Okay. Alternate number one, that is the intersection from West Canal Avenue to the boat ramp. That's in front of the restaurant, Boat Landing Restaurant. Theirs was $84,389 even. Alternate number two, that is for Mill Slough. To redo that one, $40,144. $40,144 even.
Is that Milligan paving?
Yes. And that's only just about a 300-foot section. That ain't the whole road. It's just a section in there.
Right.
Alternate number three is is 4th Street paving. Redo that. $190,202. For their total of $783,575 even.
Okay.
The next one is Coastline Construction. their lump sum, $469,072.
And how much?
$72 even.
But that's close.
Surprise, surprise.
Alternate number 1, $60,770.50. Alternate number 2, $30,447 even. Number 3, $206,586.50. For their total of $766,876 even. Barnhill Construction.
What's the last one now?
Barnhill
Barnhill.
Construction.
Is this the last one?
Yeah, this is the last one. $628,034 even.
That's the lump.
That's the lump sum.
34.
Alternate number 1, $99,275 even. Alternate number 2, $48,500 even. Alternate number 3, $374,475 even.
Could you say that again, Dustin? That last figure?
$374,475 even.
Thank you.
For a total of $1,150,284. Is for there.
1,000,000.
Repeat that one more time, please.
$1,150,284.
Question: Can we cherry pick from each one? You know, one from A, one from B, one from C. No. Okay.
You go to jail.
I'm just asking. I don't know.
What we can do, though, is we can accept any or all part of any one bid. It's
We would recommend Coastline Construction.
they're lower.
They're the lowest ones.
Have you worked with them before?
We haven't, but McGill has. They said they have done excellent work with them.
Okay.
They have seen their work. They recommend them with this. Looking at this.
Do we have an engineer's estimate on this? Did McGill provide any kind of usually they'll provide an engineer's estimate before we'll even go out to bid. We say, 'cause I was thinking that we had something in the neighborhood of $350,000 or something.
For the parking lot,
parking
I will say the last estimate we got for 4th Street was $395,000.
Okay, so now Coastline would be 180,000 less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're less on the Mill Sleuth also.
Yep.
By $10,000
Yeah.
at least. And they're
So,
less on the boat ramp by $25,000.
so separating out of here, the Powell bill would cover everything but 4th Street. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there's enough money in the Powell bill to cover all that
Yes.
without going into next year's money?
But we can't go into next year's
Oh,
money because we don't have it.
because we don't have it yet, but we have enough money to cover.
Yeah, because we haven't done a paving in the past couple of years, so we get about 100 and
So we got about 560,000 that of cost
Yeah.
here that could be covered by the Powell bill. And the people on 4th Street would have to approve the 200,000. What were the previous bids that they had, or about what range? For 4th?
4th Street,
Yeah.
360, 350.
yeah, it was initially it was like 295, then it's up to 395. It's increased over the estimates that we've got from McGill.
So this is significantly less than what
Yes.
they've been looking at
Or 4th Street.
Yes.
for 4th Street.
I'm disappointed in the price from everybody on the actual paved parking lot at the between Dave's and Town Park.
What if it was regular pavement without being pavers?
Well,
That would-
I had broached that with Public Works before with Dustin individual, specifically before, I said pavers they were adding $100,000 to this price, or $75,000 to this price. And then what he's saying is we're getting into the pervious footprint that we have out there, and pavers are impervious, but asphalt pavement is pervious, impervious.
Yeah.
So that's why McGill designed it like they did, so we would not be in an excessive footprint of impervious.
And what is the environmental rule that addresses excessive footprint for that parking lot area? Is it for parking lots, or
Well,
is it?
They're changing what's out there. So if you change what's out there, then you've got to deal with the water, and that's what it amounts to. You can't just, unless you're going to repave it in kind. If you're changing it, you got to. It's a problem. I don't know the exact specifics of it, John. I'm sure
Yeah,
Dustin
sure.
probably does, but
Once you do it, you got to pitch. You got to wonder where the water's going to go. Once you do all this,
There's $750,000 in the PAL bill fund right now.
So we're going to be using all of that.
No,
No.
because we're getting reimbursed for Fourth
Well,
Street.
Fourth
no,
Street.
we're going to be using 500,000
Yeah,
plus
about
of that.
500. Yeah. Okay. I understand.
As I said,
And Fourth Street might not happen in this
Right.
budget.
Yeah.
Well,
With that.
That'll
We
depend
have
on
to
the,
go back and, make sure that they still
the
want
people
it.
are- yeah.
And then
point.
depending on how close we are to season,
Good point.
it may have to be delayed until the fall. And if it is, then it would be in the next budget.
The next
if
budget.
we select Coastline for the work, then what that means is it'll be obvious. If I lived on 4th Street, it'd be obvious to me that instead of paying $190,000, which was the bid from Jens LLC, I'm going to be paying almost $207,000. So there's going to be a $17,000 bump because we're picking Coastline. You can't cherry pick and have Jens LLC come in and do, unless
Yeah.
we would still have the option of pulling that out of the bid and rebidding it. But then we would lose the $206,000 bid that has been placed by Coastline.
Well, this is still significantly less than what the previous estimates they had for doing 4th Street.
For 4th Street, yes.
Yeah.
Well, generally, all the costs have come down a little bit from a few years ago.
yes.
We're looking at paving and just stopped.
Yeah.
Because the cost was astronomical.
Okay. So clearly, nothing comes out of our general fund. We have the PAL bill money to do it. I make a motion that we accept the Coastline bid.
Second.
Any more discussion?
Now, we're going to take out 4th Street and hold that, or are we going to?
Well, we accept the bid, but we have to go through whatever the process is for
What
handling 4th Street.
What alternates you want to do? You want to do 1 and 2 along that?
We have to do, I believe, Mill Slough alternate 2
Yeah.
because
You
we're
gotta
not going to
do that.
remobilize a
Okay.
milling machine
Yeah.
to do that on any other, and the people
Yeah.
there have already, it's been 6 months since we first started
We
talking.
want to do the
9
lump,
months.
my view is we want to do the lump sum, we want to do alternate 1, and that's the part going down to the boat ramp, alternate 2, which is
Okay.
Mill Slough Lane, the 300-foot there. And we want to caveat in such a way that alternate 3 is dependent upon whether the people on 4th Street
Okay.
Can
accept
we
it.
do that?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So moved.
I'd go along with that because I particularly like the fact that the boat ramp paving, which is what I was going to say, if we're going to hold up on anything, let's hold up on that because that is the least critical. But I don't want to give up a $25,000 low bid on that for right now. I think that would be not very insightful because they are at least 25,000, if not 40,000 less than the other 2 bidders on that boat ramp pavement.
Any more questions, comments? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There's nothing else. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
no more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Send your email.